I'm going to show you 7 different techniques on how to mix watercolor paint. I will start with the most common and move to the less known ways. That will be the first part of the video. In the second, I'll give you a step-by-step tutorial on using these mixing techniques in a complete painting, so you know where to use which mixing style to achieve the best results and create stunning art even as a beginner. Hi, I'm Leila, a professional artist. Welcome to my studio and to this video that will help you to get your art to the next level, just like all the other videos on this channel. So remember to subscribe, press the notification bell, and leave a comment and let me know if you are that 3% of beginners who knows all of these techniques, or whether something was new to you or you didn't even think of it as a technique to mix paint. Okay, let's get into this. This video will also give you a review of the Lightwish professional watercolor paint set of 24 colors. The paint set was sent to me by the brand for a review, but they do not sponsor the video in any way, so I will be giving you a non-biased opinion on the product. I will also leave the non-affiliate links under the video. Non-affiliate means I do not earn anything from the sales of this product, so it is there for you to see if you want to check out their products for yourself. And the paint set comes with this little useful chart sheet where you can create your own swatches, but I will also use a Swatchbook from the same brand. It's a convenience book, really. It has printed swatching patterns and protective paper in between each sheet, like in the old photo albums, to keep all your swatches nice and safe. The one strange thing that I have noticed is that the order of the colors printed here are different from the order that they're in here. So what I will do is I will swap these around according to this, because this kind of makes more sense to me. The first one here is permanent lemon yellow, so this is how I will swatch them. Each one of these comes with these sort of a little sticky papers, so I guess you could also stick them onto somewhere if you wanted to keep the information, name or anything like this. Stick it on here like that. I actually really like it when brands do that, because then that paper, is not thrown away but still reused. And of course I will use the brush supplied as well, so I can give you a good feedback on that too. I like how the paint has a marking for color fastness. To me that really screams professional grade. I also like the color payoff. It's very intense. It doesn't even stand next to the student grade Lightwish that I have reviewed. I mean, that's also a great pack for beginners, but this is a much better quality. The paint is much thicker and much more pigmented, so the pigmentation here is wonderful. They also tell you if the color is transparent or whether it's opaque or semi-opaque. They also specify that their binder is gum arabic based, and they also give you the name of the pigment, which again means that the real pigments are in here. It's not just some kind of a dye or colorant that's in there. So yeah, this is quite good, especially if you think of the price range. Oh, and something I've just realized, that you can actually take out the tray with the paint tubs out and you get extra space for mixing. That is actually really great. That's wonderful. It also means that this palette would be a great traveling companion. This set is also really affordable price-wise. It's priced even lower than some brands price their student grade, so I'm very curious to see how good this paint behaves. By the way, if you guys see tiny little flies flying around during the video, it's because I got lovely flowers from my students, and those little flies, I think, are drawn to these flowers. Okay, so what can I tell you about this paint? As always, you know, when you look at paint, you might have one opinion, but then when you test it all out, when you swatch all the colors, you start to see the full story of what the set is like. I'd say this is a probably basic set. So if you are wanting a set that has a little bit of everything, this is probably great. If you're going for anything specialized, then you might sort of feel that, well, I don't really want the greens because I can mix the blues with yellows and so on. Then of course you'd be better off getting something in tubes where you can, you know, manage your own palette. I don't know if this paint is made in tubes, which I actually wish that it was, because there were some colors that I really loved. I really liked the paints gray in this set. It's sometimes it's really dark and it almost like a cool black, but here it has that sort of a, I don't know, almost smokiness to it. So it's quite beautiful. Found quite interesting with the reds, like the scarlet red, when it's quite intense and looks like a deep color. It's sort of almost really warm, and then when you add quite a bit of water, it becomes pink. So something like this, I think, will be perfect for those people that want to create these floral kind of patterns. You know, when you're painting roses, for example, when they look warm in the shadow and cool when the light hits it, you literally can just use one color to create that effect. But if you're looking for a deep cool tone, then I guess you would have to mix it with other colors on the palette. Yellows are very lovely, very clean, and they have that sort of a, like some quinacridons have that, you know, where when it goes quite intense, you've got this intense, rich, almost deep color, and then as soon as the water comes in, you've got that really bright, zingy kind of a color. And I personally really love this in watercolor. I know everyone has their own thing for what they like and what they dislike, so your opinion might be different from mine, but I'm just telling you what I feel. Another thing that I've noticed about this is that there isn't a single granulating color in here. All of the colors are quite staining, and I've noticed this, that even after applying, you know, one layer, before the paint even dries, as I go in with a brush to move the paint, the pigment managed to etch into the paper. And this is, I think this is like a mixed media paper altogether. It's not even watercolor paper, so it does have that layer on the top. So for paint to do this so quickly, that's definitely, a lot of these colors are super staining. So if you like to work in layers where you create something and then you re-wet it and take it back, you might have trouble with this. Some colors are quite interesting. Indigo is the color that it almost doesn't have that specific bracket that it should meet. So every brand makes it a little bit different. I've seen indigo where it almost separates into blue and brown. I've seen indigo where it's almost black, like about this color, like the paint's gray. Here, indigo is almost like an ink. You know, those beautiful inks that sort of sometimes double up in color. So when you've got the wash, it's very blue. And then when you've got an intense color, it almost gives you that red sheen. I mean, I don't know if camera can capture it really well, but I find things like that very interesting, especially if it's something new, if I haven't seen this in other brands. So yeah, it's quite an interesting color, this one. Some of these colors remind me a little bit in texture other brands, like for example this indigo really reminds me of Daniel Smith. You know, there's that almost mattness to the paint when it's diluted quite a bit. It almost makes the paper look more matte than it was before. Similar effect that you can get with this brand with Paints Gray and Prussian Blue. Some colors like greens, they almost have that, almost like this thickness to it. Body to it, and that's very reminiscent of Schmenker watercolor. I quite like the brush again, and I was really impressed with the student grade brushes as well. I think this is a little bit soft, a little bit less springy, and a little bit more squirrel-like versus the other brush in the student grade set. Can't say that this is better than the other one or the other one is better than this one. I quite like both of them. I think they'd be perfect for different things. I love the capability of this brush to load so much. And so they put their pigments through careful examination for each color powder's characteristics, including density, hardness, weight, acidity, and alkalinity. The main binder is gum arabic, and I think they stated on their little wrappers. Yeah, so they make their binders to enable the pigments to achieve maximum saturation and ensure optimal preservation. And now it's time for us to get into the actual techniques of mixing watercolor paint. I will still carry on doing a review here and there, but I'd like to teach you something else, guys, as well. So the first technique, which is the most popular, this is what probably I'd say 99.9% of beginners know, and that is mixing on the palette. So this is quite a good setup in terms of using the palette. I showed you before. This one also comes out to offer extra mixing space. I wouldn't need that much space today, but it also offers you nice deep wells for mixing and a little bit more of the shallow situation here. Maybe you might want to squeeze some extra paint here or something like that. So this is all very helpful. Technique number one. For example, I have this yellow here. I'm just gonna pop some here, then wash the brush, get some of this deep red and mix this together. And now I have a color that's mixed. You can mix as many colors like this as you want. You can mix another color in there, always making sure you wash your brush in between reasonably well. So let's see what will happen if I mix a bit of blue in there, and you've got another color all together. This is the most basic, the most common used technique. This is what you see in all the videos, usually explained for the beginners, very simple to follow. And if you have tried painting with watercolor, chances are you've probably used this technique already. As a palette, you can use any kind of a dish. You can use a built-in palette. You can even use a scrap piece of paper. You know, that's what we were taught, for example, in Russia, in art school. So that's technique number one. Now we come to the technique number two. The technique number two is also very common. Not many people explain it, but it is, you know, you do see it here and there. And that happens when you are painting with one color. And then while that paint is wet, you pick up another color. Let's take this one and mix it straight on there. Now the pros of this technique, you're literally painting, you're not just applying a flat color like in these techniques. So this is mixing on the work, creating a wet on wet, while the previous layer is still wet. Some call this alla prima technique, some call it just wet on wet technique. It is mixing in one color into another color straight on your work while the previous color is still wet. You can mix as many colors in that way as you'd like. This next technique you might still know if you are a beginner, but you would need to study watercolor a little bit to actually be quite well introduced to it. This technique happens when you are applying layers on top of each other but drying them in between. So let's try this. I'm taking one color, waiting for this to dry, picking up another color, and on top of the previous layer that is 100% dry, you need to make sure it's dry. A little tip to know that it is dry: you put your hand under the paper. If it still feels cold, it means there's still quite a bit of dampness. So you can finish it off with a hair dryer or just leave it for a little bit longer. Otherwise your paint will run in and mix in and you won't get this technique. So here we go. You apply a transparent layer over it. So these colors are mixing, but not because they're actually intermixing, but because they're layered on top of each other. You can do this with any colors, and layer up many different layers, you will get the most vibrant results if you are applying semi-transparent colors. So you've got a semi-transparent color here, another semi-transparent color. You can layer up lighter colors on top of darker ones and darker colors on top of lighter ones, and every time you will get a different effect. And as I said, you can go in and wait for this to dry and then finish it off with another layer. You can build up as many layers as you need to for whatever it is that you are portraying. And this technique is called glazing. It is not exclusive to watercolor. It is also very commonly used in oil painting. I even use it with acrylics. I think it's a great addition to any style because whenever you've created whatever, you can always brighten things up, lighten things up, or darken them, and it creates that special kind of depth and glow. Like, look at this and look at that. There's more of the glow, you know. You don't get that muddiness that you do when you mix colors together. Here you get brighter colors. I'm not saying that bright is better than muddy. Sometimes you just need this and sometimes you need that. That's why keep watching and I will show you all of these techniques. Okay, now the next way of mixing watercolor paint also includes doing it on your artwork. For this technique, I personally really like using a flatter brush. So see here I've got like a cat's tongue brush, but it's not necessary. I mean, depending of course on what you are working with. So what you want to do is you want to create a layer of color. So here I'm going to grab some red and with quite a bit of water, and I'm just gonna go in like that. All right, next I'm going to get another color. So this color can be, I don't know, this color here, whatever it is. I don't have the chart out, and also quite wet, and you are just mixing them in. So you see how here they're creating this transition, and you can see how something like this can be really useful if you are creating landscapes, if you're merging one color into another. I personally have showed you guys these different techniques. They're perfect for creating gradients. I do have a video on how to create beautiful gradients and washes without having the cauliflower and things like that. So I will link all of these videos under this video, so you guys can just go over there and have a look if you want to know in depth about any specific thing. So here we have this situation where we've got this color mixing into another color. We've got both colors on each side, and you've got a little bit of that mix going on. It is not the smooth thing that you might achieve when you're pre-mixing your colors on the palette, for example, you know, like in our #1 technique, but it is perfect for certain areas where you want that mix to happen, but still you want that separation. Okay, that brings me to the technique #5, and now we're starting to enter that territory where it's not very common that you would find these things explained on tutorials. The technique #5 is called double loading. Now, what it is it can be done in many different ways, and I will show you a couple. You basically use two sides of the brush. So one side of the brush to load one color and another side to load another color. And now we can create, so for example, this is on dry paper. We can do this on wet paper. You are creating this organic mix. When do you want to use this? Anything, you know, like floral or trees, you know, when you're working on landscape, when you're working on water, anything that has two colors together, somewhat mixed, but you don't want to have too much control over how these colors mix. And it creates this really interesting sort of effect. You see this technique not just in watercolor, you can see this technique in oils, gouache as well, you know, sometimes all those floral decorative brushwork and stuff like this, when they sort of paint flowers like that, when using, you know, two, sometimes even three colors. So it's an interesting technique, and it does take a little bit of practice to, you know, get going. But there is another way of utilizing this technique, and it is called doubling. So what you do is you, for example, have a color on your paintbrush. So I'll just load up my paintbrush with this color, and then without washing it off, see, it's full of paint, I'm going in for another color, let's say this one here, and I'm just grabbing a little bit so you can literally see. Here I've got one color, and on the tip I've got another color, and this is what you will get with this. See, we don't really have the purple and the yellow anymore, but we've got that mix, and we have not a pure mix. We've got some darker areas, some lighter areas. So it was this yellow and this purple. Now, can you see those colors in here? You kind of can, but it's mixed it up in such an interesting way. So you can always create these very interesting textures. And see here, I've used a round brush. You can create these kind of patterns on wet paper, on dry paper, using flat brush, using a round brush with a tip or without the tip. It's different sizes, so it can be really beautiful. It's perfect for anything natural, again, landscapes or any kind of loose painting. It's beautiful for all of those things as well. Did you guys know about this technique? Let me know in the comments. I want to know. I want to know what you guys watch, and if there are any empty gaps on YouTube that I can actually fill in with my knowledge. So I'd love to hear from you. If you're enjoying videos on this channel and would like to support it, please head over to my Patreon page. And not only will you be helping this channel grow, you will also be getting a lot of interesting information for yourself, because I have over 100 videos there that you can unlock when you sign up. Many of these videos are very helpful tutorials. Some of these are behind the scenes videos. You also will get a lot of different updates and other footage that you don't get to see here on YouTube. I look forward to seeing you there. Okay, technique number 6 involves using another object, not a brush. You can use the brush to load the paint onto another object. So, and it can be anything. Really, your imagination here is whatever is going to guide you. So here I have like an old used up card, and here I have a sponge. This technique is probably a little bit easier if you have paint in tubes, but because I have this that I'm testing in this video, I'm going to stick to this. So what you can do is you can load up more than one color to a surface. So here I've got a sponge, so I'm loading up a little bit of purple here, and I'm going to load up a bit of this bright green. As I said, this is a bit easier if you've got paint in tubes. By the way, if you'd like to know the difference between getting paint in tubes versus getting paint in tubs, I do have a video on that too. So make sure to head over and check this out. Then I'll get you to come over here, and you can dampen your paper or you can work on wet. See, I didn't wash my brush well enough. And then you just apply this onto your paper. So you kind of are mixing it in a very, very organic way. Again, what is it good for? Oh, there are so many things that this would be perfect for, from clouds in the sky to florals to forests. And remember, you can use colors in a much softer way, so using more water. Here I went for really intense colors. For backgrounds, this can be a perfect background as well. Like, for example, if you're working on, for instance, a beautiful flower that you're painting in a lot of detail, and then a very common question I get, what do I do for a background? Well, why not do something like this? You can even do it before you paint the flower. Mask it out, so you won't get any paint onto that area, and then create something like this. And this is beautiful. It's very suggestive as well, suggestive way to mix color, because it just looks like something already. It already looks like a flower or leaf or something like that. And depending on what colors you use, you can create a different result. Now let's have a look what will happen if we load up some paint onto the card, for example, so a firmer surface. Again, just like before, it is a little bit easier to do this with, it might not even work like this. It's hard to pick up quite a bit of paint like this from the tubs, but anyways, I'll give it a go. This is still a bit wet, so it all might run together. So here we have another way of doing it. As I said, it is more successful when you're working with paint that comes in tubes, just because you can squeeze quite a bit. See, there's obviously not enough red on there versus the blue. But look at this, something interesting that I have noticed. The blue started to granulate here. Remember how I said that when I did the swatches, all the colors looked perfectly smooth? Well, I guess they don't stay smooth everywhere, and if you are into granulation, maybe this is worth to give it a try as well. That's why I like to do a thorough sort of, test, first impression testing out things. Okay, so this is number 6, and soon it will be number 7. And I bet you're wondering, what else is there? How else can we mix the paint? But this is a very interesting one and almost never really talked about. It's not kind of a technique that you always want to use, but there are some situations where it can create such a beautiful effect, and this is exactly what you need for your art. And the first thing that you want to do is you want to dampen the page. You can do it with a brush, but I like to use spray bottle for this technique. I think it gives it just that little extra thing. So here we go. So you want to spray the paper. It's getting into this as well, into the other technique. And then you load your paintbrush with one color and you just hit it against something, or if you've got a firmer brush, you can just flick it. Now you grab another color, and here I'm going to grab some brown. You want to make sure that you have enough paint on your brush. Now we're flicking another color. You can do this with as many colors as you'd like. The cool thing about this is that you can turn it around, let it drip. You can leave it like that. You can spray some more water on it. And see how it all mixes together in this very organic but a very different way. Like this is very organic, but it gives you a very different look of colors merging into each other. And here you've got a different look altogether. This is perfect for trees, or if you're using even lighter colors, a little bit less concentrated, more diluted, you can create really beautiful trees in the distance, or florals, or whatever it is that you want to use, depending on which colors you choose. Instead of spraying water, you can spray granulating medium on. There are so many different possibilities, and you can play with each one of those techniques. So this is technique number 7. I hope you guys understand that these techniques that I've shown you here, these are the basics, and each one of those can be really played with and opened up. Like, for example, this technique here, right? So I showed you just more of a flat way of blurring them together. You can always drip paint as well on it, so to create, a little bit of a different effect. But it's really just the formula of that specific paint mixing technique that I wanted to show you. So let me know in the comments, which one do you use the most, which one you did not know about, or maybe you have seen in an artwork but didn't know how to do, and which one do you think that you actually really eager to try in your art. I would really like to know that. Now I would like to show you how to use these techniques in the finished artwork. Okay, so let's get on with painting. I will put a photo of the sketch on Patreon for those of you who are my patrons who would want to follow along. But what I really want to concentrate on is giving you more demonstration on how you can incorporate it into the painting. This dreamy sort of a house, imaginary kind of almost fairy tale sort of a situation. The first technique I'm going to use, and I'm going to use technique number 1, where I pre-mix colors on the palette and then deposit them onto the artwork. So first I'm going to dampen the paper. I'm still using the brush that came in with the set. I find it being quite versatile because of a really lovely pointed tip. I'm just avoiding the house sort of a structure and just going for... Okay, so I'm mixing the blue and I'm adding just a tiny little bit of brown. I'm using the deep brown. In this set, it is called burnt brown. So what it does is that it neutralizes the blue, so it's not as bright and zingy. And I'm applying it onto the damp surface. Now I'm going to use technique number 2. I'm going to grab a little bit of ochre, just a little bit on the brush. And remember, all of these techniques can be done with strong colors or soft colors. And I'm just adding a little bit of it into the sky. And you see how I'm mixing it right in there. And again, I'm seeing some granulation with this paint. This paint is such a surprise. Wow. I'm actually loving the granulation in here. As you guys know, I do like granulation. And remember, this is nothing to do with mixing paint, but just a technique. If you ever need to make certain areas lighter while the paint is still wet, you can just absorb the water from your brush and then go in and reabsorb it back out, like maybe you're making a sun on a, maybe like a wintry day, or clouds, or anything else, really. Now the paper I'm using, just in case you guys are wondering, this is a mixed media paper, just because this is the paper that I have in the very handy album, and I can just perch it up because I'm still working on my boards. As you will know, probably, if you're following me, that I have revamped my table and things like that, so things are still in construction. So now I'm just going to go in and add a little bit more of that yellow here and there. I like that. And it sort of adds a little bit of that variation, which is so very important in any painting, but especially watercolor. Now, we've used 2 techniques. I'm going to go back to technique number 1, and this mix that I have here, I'm going to add a bit more brown, a little bit brighter this time. So again, blue and brown. But I'm going to employ technique number 3. Because this is dry, I'm just going to apply another layer over this. And again, I'm going to use technique number 1, where I mix the color on the palette, and technique number 3, where I glaze over just one more time. This is 100% dry. I'm finishing it off with a hair dryer just to make filming a little bit faster. Here we go, and here I'm just going to fade it out again. Yeah, you guys, these colors are very, very staining. You know, they didn't lie on that brochure that came with the paint, saying that they grind them very, very finely. Now I'm going to use technique number 4. So I'm going to grab a little bit of green. Just a little bit of green, quite diluted. And this is still a bit damp, so I'm just going to merge it in, so creating a wash over a damp color. So that is allowing me to very seamlessly kind of blend it like that and create that sort of a hazing out look. You don't have to haze out depending on your subject matter. This is the look that I want to create here. And now I'm going to mix the green with a little bit of blue and a little bit of brown together. So now 3 colors together. So again, mixing technique number 1, mixing colors on the palette. And I'm going to create little trees or something like that, sort of a semi-transparent. And wait for this to dry and then intensify the ones on the front. So some trees on the a bit closer with a bit of a shadow underneath them, so that kind of pulls them in and creates that distance. Now while all this is drying, I'm going to use technique number 5. Technique number 5, remember, it's double loading. I'm not going to do right and left because I'm not doing any kind of decorative art here, but I'm going to do the back and the front. So I'm going to load up some paint, but I'm going to make sure that there's quite a bit of water. So I will mix that paint on the palette first. So I've got that green. That's the one I've got on the palette here. With a bit of blue. But I'm also going to pick up a little bit of yellow. So this yellow that's in the middle on the tip of the brush. And now I'm going to apply all of this. So remember, this is technique number 5. So this is dabbling or whatever this is called. But, you know, it's double loading really. So it mixes my paint for me and creates these areas of one color and then the other color naturally. So this is, in this situation, it's very helpful for me in a way that it actually creates that look of, you know, that feel that when it's not sort of all even, when it's not all the same. You can add a little bit of that color there and you get that sort of a bumpiness through it. Now remember technique number 6. That's when we use another object to create a specific texture on the painting. I'm not going to use a very sharp, you know, that card that I showed you, but I'm going to use the sponge. There are some trees over here, so I'm just going to do a little bit of this, a little bit of rich brown, so burnt sienna. So a little bit of burnt sienna here and some of this green like that. You can see that they're here just side by side. I just want to make sure I don't come out of the tape here. Remember, you can always add a little extra to this technique. So here I'm just going to merge some of these areas into larger clumps. Because this is not just a technique that I'm showing you this time. I want it to look a certain way. Now I'm going to go into technique number 2. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of yellow. And just right there, just place a little bit. And now again, technique number 2, I'm just going to load up these 2 dark colors that I've mixed right there. So this is kind of a little bit of a technique number 5 as well, you know, mixing up, applying 2 colors at the same time. Yeah, it's very staining. Look at that. I just left it there for a second and it already formed a mark. Even the browns, and they usually they're not staining at all in brands, so it's quite interesting. I love the tip on this brush. It's just so perfect for little details and for these really natural, very natural lines. Okay, now I'm going to employ technique number 7. So I've loaded up quite a bit of sort of a strong green, grassy green onto the brush. And while this is still damp, I'm just going to I need a bit more. just deposit some of this and let that mix in with the color, and that's how you can use it in this artwork. Here I'm using a technique number 2, where I'm applying one color into the other while it is still wet. So just adding a bit of ochre into that brown, and now adding a little bit of darker brown, all while it is still wet. Now just a little bit of brown on the damp paper, and blue, and again a bit more brown. Mixing two colors on the brush, so just using double loading here and then just mixing it in. So you see how all of these techniques can also be used interchangeably as well, so you can use 2 or 3 at the same time. I love this brush. Look at all the detail I can get. I haven't used like other, except for this one, because I don't want to wash the paint off this. It's just, funnily enough, I really do think that Lightwish do make the best brushes, especially if you take price into consideration. That student pack had great brushes, this as well. I love the paper as well that they make. This paint is, well, you need to keep watching if you want to know what I think about the paint. So again, I'm picking up 2 greens on the brush. Just here and there, I'm just popping little leaves. I can add some of those in here, maybe a little bit larger. Here it's wet on wet. And now I'm going to go in with my liner brush for some final details. So I'm not going to be mixing much else except for maybe just, you know, that technique number 1 where you mix everything on the palette, but that's about it. Because all I want to do is just create some fine lines and just create a bit more intricate lines, but also very natural looking, like branches. Okay, you guys, the painting is pretty much finished and I've dried it up with a hair dryer, so it's super dry. I just want to do one last thing, and I'm just going to pick up a little bit of yellow, put it onto the clean sort of a thing, and dilute it with quite a bit of water. Okay, so there's more water than there is paint. And I don't know why, I just want to create a little bit of a glow here. So I'm going to very quickly go with the technique number 3. So remember, that's glazing. Just very quickly like that. Just to create a little bit of that haziness and that sort of a golden kind of a glow. Just a little bit of that over the clouds as well. Again, you want to make sure that everything is perfectly dry. just a little bit more over the tree. So this is glazing. This is sort of a glazing is a great technique also for bringing the painting all together. So by adding a little bit of color here and here, you can really just cozy it up like that. Well, in this case, cozying it up, you don't have to, not every painting would need that, but you can definitely create unity with this. So we've got cool shadows going through this side, and we've got that warm light over here. We can add a little bit of it on the roof as well. So here we go. I think now it's definitely complete, and I am going to remove the masking tape. Okay, very quickly, I'm gonna go over how I feel about this paint and what I think about it. So remember, these are the swatches that we did with all the information and everything. And I did tell you my first impression of some colors that really stood out to me, some colors I didn't like. So I won't go over this again. But now using it in the painting, you guys, you know what really surprised me is that so many of these colors are actually granulating. I don't understand how none of them, absolutely none of them granulated on the swatches, but so many of them granulated here. The blues, the browns, even greens and yellows, maybe because they were mixed up with blues, of course. I found it very surprising and quite interesting. Quality-wise, I think if you are looking at quality and price at the same time, I think this is great paint. Really amazing. You get this whole cool sort of a box, of course, with the, you know, with the paint, and then even this cloth here comes with it. Everything's kind of you know, sort of purpley and pink, the packaging. You know, you've got reasonably good quality paint. This paint dilutes quite well, so it interacts with water quite well. It doesn't sit there like a rock for 5 minutes while you're trying to, you know, get it going. And it has the intensity. Here you go. So colors, you know, really good payoff. Some colors are really interesting. And you know, I've got my own palette that I use with really expensive, you know, artist grade brands. I really love some of the colors, and I wish that they came in tubes as well, so that I could actually refill and just have one little thing, you know, sitting in my palette. Like, I absolutely loved indigo in this brand. Payne's gray is quite beautiful here too. This interesting color that looks warm when it's intense, and then when you dilute it with water, it becomes very sort of a rosé. It's beautiful. The yellows are great too. Me personally, would I swap the palette that I already have, the artist grade palette from different brands that I've been, you know, putting together very carefully for this? Probably not. But you can't, you know, I've got so many colors there, and then I've got only 24 here. But would I take this with me if I'm going on a trip? Of course I would. And not to mention the brush. This brush is so versatile. I've only really needed to resort to this brush right at the end. And if I didn't want super fine sort of lines like this, I could get away with using this one even for these kind of branches. So it fits perfectly in here in the middle as well. And yeah, would I take this with me when I'm going somewhere? 100%. There's also another thing about this paint set. It really reminded me of one of my first professional sets that I had, and it's that Soviet paint, the one that used to be called Leningradskaya paint, but I think now a lot of people know it as White Nights, because now of course they're selling overseas. It's been around for years, and it's one of those things where there is something about this, even the way the colors are, the choice of colors on this palette, and the that quality that you get just really reminds me of that paint. And you can see how I was painting this and not even once did I feel that, oh, I wish there was this color that I have on my other palette. You know, that didn't cross my mind even once, which I'm surprised about. Ooh, guess what? I forgot to put little tree stumps here. I'll just do them with a pencil like that. Funny how sometimes you forget things. And I hope the techniques that I showed you found very useful too. Just remember that even though I showed them to you step by step, you know, in this little sort of a harmonica book now, this is what I see a lot of tutorials do. If they're explaining how to do, for example, glazing technique, then everything on the painting is done with glazing. Perhaps it's a good way of really highlighting that technique, but it's very rarely that in real life when you're painting you'll be making everything with glazing or everything wet on wet, unless it's a very quick sketch. So hopefully this gave you a new perspective on mixing paint, and the way you mix it can really dictate the technique that you're using, and that can really alter how your work looks at the end. And guys, just to let you know just how good this brush is, I'm not sure if it's real fur bristle or whether it is a synthetic copying the real thing. This brush I bought myself from a shop. This is Da Vinci brand. Also mop brush, and this has been one of my go-to brushes for when I need to work with something with quite a bit of water and then to use the tip. And I've paid about, I'd say about 45 or 35, this was a long time ago, quite a few years ago, New Zealand dollars for it. Pretty much like almost the same amount that you would pay for the whole set of this. And if I had to choose between these two brushes, hands down I would go for the one that was in the set, in the Lightwish set, just because of the incredible tip. This brush, as I said, this is like a few years old. It's not super old, but maybe 4 years old. But yeah, you can kind of see the way that they both hold the tip. I'll just show you on the other side of this. So of course they both hold water reasonably well, and then the tip, see, I can't get super fine line, whereas this one, and this brush is smaller, so it means I can create smaller washes with this. This brush, on the other hand, is much larger, so it's got a larger vessel in there to hold the water. And look at this. Sorry. Look at that. Like, hands down, this is a better brush, and it just came in with the set. I'm really pleasantly surprised. I love this, you guys. So if you are in need of an upgrade because you've been using sort of a really cheaper version of student grade paint, I really like this one. And as I said, I would use this one myself, especially if I have to go somewhere or anything like this, because it sort of has everything in it to take away with you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you got something new for yourself out of it, remember to share it with your family, friends, share it with maybe people on social media or anyone that you think might like to see this or get something new for themselves out of it. As always, I want to say an amazing, huge thank you to my wonderful patrons who are supporting this channel. You guys, that's how I can update things, that's how I can get new equipment and things like that. So thank you so very much for your help. And I look forward to seeing you soon in the next video here on YouTube, or remember to check out the Patreon to unlock over 100 videos for yourself, along with some posts and other things. I hope you guys have a lovely day. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'll see you soon.